coming to you with a tag about book snobbery. Now, until recently, I would have said that I grew out of book snobbery at a very young age because at 16 I moved schools and it changed from what I was reading happened to change at the same time. So I went from my first school where I was in a bit of a Regency literature, classic literature binge, and it was, Kirsten thinks she's too clever for us. Kirsten's too good for us. To sixth form, where I went into a horror binge, and it was, Kirsten's a bit thick. Kirsten can't really keep up. So I was like, actually, I haven't changed. Neither of these things is true, or both are, but I like to believe that neither of these things were true. And therefore I thought, right, I'm never going to be snobbish. However, I've got a confession for you, and it is coming later in the video. So my definition of a book snob is someone who looks at what you're reading and says, oh, you're not good enough, or oh, you think you're better than us, or in some way looks at what you're reading and says that means you're thick. Someone who looks at what you're reading and is like, you're too thick to read proper literature, or you only read rubbish, or like that kind of thing. And someone who doesn't necessarily see, like, they'll often look at like fluffy literature and be like, you should be reading something deep and meaningful. But actually, there is totally a place for fluff, and there's totally a place for all that. And anyway, even if it wasn't, there's probably more to be got out of that literature than if you just were like, well, look, it's not worthy of my attention. Okay, is there a genre of type of book you would never consider reading? No, not really. I don't read a lot of romance. I read even less comedy. I've just realised I've not been getting on with historical recently, but I don't think there's anything I would absolutely flat out say I'm never going to read. Number 3, does erotica count as literature? Yes. Yes. Otherwise, you have to say that Story of O is not literature. You have to say Venus in Furs is not literature. You have to say that basically everything the Marquis de Sade wrote is not literature. Number 4, is it better to read classic literature or the latest big seller? No. I mean, it depends what mood you're in. Like, if you're in the mood to read, I don't know, I've been rereading doing an Anna Green Gables reread. So if I'm in the mood for that, then I'm probably not going to pick up Onyx Storm. But my library, I do have it out from the library at the moment, Onyx Storm. And I also have Ulysses out from the library. You know, that's just the mood I was in right now. Sometimes I think it's a good idea to read what your friends are reading. There's certainly books I've read in order to feel like I understood where they were coming from, even if I didn't love the book. And sometimes I love them and sometimes I don't, and that's okay. So from that point of view, maybe if all your friends are reading classics, then if you want to understand them better, maybe reading a little bit of what they're reading. But if you don't love it, then no, don't read it. And if you do love it, then yeah, do read it. Have you ever bragged about reading a classic in order to sound smart? No. And I've never lied about reading a book. I mean, I've sometimes been wrong. I've been like, I think I've read this book, but then I go and look at it and I actually haven't read it, or I don't remember it. That's slightly different. But have I ever bragged about a book? No, because I don't think that one book is more worthy than another. I don't think the fact I read like 150 or whatever it is books per year it makes me in any way better than someone who has the willpower to sit down and watch a telly, or who's out rescuing kittens all night, or whatever else you're doing. It's not sitting still without your mind racing. Like, that sounds like a massive super skill. So for me, what was the question? Oh yeah, have I ever bragged about reading classic? No, I've never bragged about reading at all, because I sort of assume that, if you like reading, you like reading, and if you don't, you don't. Do audiobooks count as reading? Yes. Okay, so I was just going to say yes and move on, but You've probably seen the study which said that exactly the same bits in your brain fire when you're listening to an audiobook as when you're reading a physical book. I personally have an auditory processing disorder, so audiobooks are harder for me, particularly to concentrate on. But I was reading someone earlier on who think that if you think that only physical books count as reading, then that means that someone who's blind can never read, and that feels like bizarre. Someone's blind, severely just like all sorts of people who cannot access that material in print. You're gatekeeping it for them, and that's just you. No, don't do that. Don't do that, my darling. Have I ever looked down at someone for reading a popular fluff book? No. Have I been looked down on for reading a popular fluff book? Yeah, for sure. Does it feel nice? No. Would I do that to someone else? No. Have you ever been the recipient of someone else's snobbery? Oh, well, that's covered in the last question. Would you ever be friends with a snob? Maybe you already are. Yeah, I probably would, or at least I'd try. I'm not in the business of excluding them. But if they're that snobby, they're probably not going to want to be friends with me anyway, based on my reading materials. So, you know. Are people who don't read less sophisticated than people who do? I doubt it. I'm not quite sure what sophisticated means or what that looks like. I've seen studies that say that people who read are more empathetic than people who don't. But I'm guessing that means consuming fiction. So I'm guessing if you get your fiction in some other way, then that also works. And I don't think that reading non-fiction is necessarily like, I don't know. I don't even really understand the question. I'm sorry. So I'm going to go with no, because if I was sufficiently sophisticated, I would get the question. And if you got sophisticated by reading, I would understand the question. Measure yourself based on your answers. Are you a snob? Okay, so based on my answers, I'm not a snob. However, this is confession time. This is confession time. I thought I was immune to snobbery, as previously said, because I'd gone through this transition period in my teens. But I recently realised that I do have a weak spot, and it is the bonk buster. Now, I don't know whether the word bonk buster is used outside of England, and it's definitely set in a certain time within English literature. Like, I don't think people are still writing bonkbusters, or if they are, then they're the same people who are writing through the 80s and 90s. But it is a brick. It's a blockbuster brick of a book, which is usually almost exclusively written by women, possibly exclusively written by women, female gay sex. So it's a sexually explicit blockbuster, and it's usually set in this very posh world of tennis and garden parties and champagne on the lawn, and I don't know. And they were with a sort of writer who were writing book after book after book after book, just like churning them out, and really big, thick commercial romances with plenty of sex. And I feel like I'm repeating myself. And I mentioned that I couldn't believe that my partner had one on the shelf. To some people who were like, don't be so quick to judge. Have you actually read it? Because actually the social commentary on those, that's more like the updated Austen than like, I don't know, than like the updated pulps that didn't even make it into the new century. So my aim is to have a go at a blockbuster at some point, but I am a little bit intimidated because I did have this idea that these are kind of mass market pulp rubbish, and that's not how I'd like to think of myself as thinking about books. So wish me luck. Okay, and tag some people. I want you to read it, to play it, and I'd love to hear it. And let me know what you think. Am I a snob? Am I mostly not a snob, but just with this one weak spot? Would you still be my friend? I don't know. I'll see you soon anyway. Bye.